Hey, what's happening, everybody? Good morning. Robert Phoenix here, broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg, Texas. How is everyone today out there in the third dimensional realm of the Matrix? What's going on? Day after the State of the Union, which went on for quite a long time. I watched most of it, and I have some comments about it. But I also was watching some other stuff along the way. I was much more interested in why Hitler lost the Battle of Stalingrad. I've been involved in a 5-hour documentary on that. It's a lot of heavy lifting. Let me see. Let me go into the alternate chat room world, alternate chat reality, and that way I can begin to monitor some of these comments that you folks make. And I always like to say hello in the morning and hang out with y'all for a minute. Hang out with y'all. Let's go, let's do this. The dismantlement of Jordan Peterson. People are on to Jordan Peterson. I know. A lot of people like very invested in Jordan. I love that interview that he did with Kathy, what's her name, on the BBC. That really put him on the map, that interview. Kathy, here we go. Just aligning things here so I can check you all out in the chat. Let's see what we got going on. Hi, chat. Got 9 people watching me now. I can't even seem to find the chat now. Here, let me just show chat. Let's see what we got. Well, it looks like my chat now has been disabled from me on the live stream. And here we go. Nice, good. Hi, Judy. Nice to see you all. Hello, Joanne Farina. Nice to see you. There's Rhonda. Good morning. Yeah, so listen, I like this part of my day. It's like I get to say hi to my peeps. Let's see who else. Nobody else showing up here. We'll get here all eventually. Hi, Anna. We'll all get here eventually. That's comforting, isn't it? So let me just kind of go over the State of the Union and address it. I think for what Trump is trying to do and what he is communicating and staying with his talking points and with his program, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't agree with, he hit it out of the park. I thought that was a great kind of Trumpian, emotive, backed up by these appearances with people from the audience that were supporting his points or his platform. And I thought his pace was very measured, and he was connecting with the emotions, with the moment. I thought it was a good sort of Trump State of the Union speech. I mean, the whole thing with the women in white was a little bizarre. I mean, what is that all about? You know, it's like we live in this, polarized black and white, men and women, Republican, Democrat. It's getting tiresome. It's like it's really just getting tiresome. But at the same time, I also understand that there is a Maginot line in the sand, and we're reminded of it quite frequently, especially when we have a public spectacle like we did last night, where many of whom refused to stand up and applaud, which would never have happened. I don't know. Did that happen during the Obama administration? I tuned out, man. I tuned out with Obama. I tuned in for some stuff and the big picture stuff, but I couldn't listen to Obama. I couldn't listen to being lectured at and scolded for not being enlightened enough or whatever, right? And he didn't have any interesting ideas. Does Trump have any interesting ideas? I don't know. At least he's talking about things like NAFTA, and who knows? Maybe the deal will suck. maybe it will, get us back into a kind of a modified version of the TPP. I don't know. Remains to be seen, but at least he's talking about things that matter on some level. NAFTA was a terrible deal. It was an absolutely terrible deal. And I've talked about it before, and it really, I think, derailed a lot of potential for the people of Mexico to have their own property, that have access to their own property, and have the ability to buy whatever they need in order to support the program. I'm talking mainly farming and ranching, because a lot of those families lost their land because they couldn't afford the stuff that they needed because the price was raised by the marketplace, by the corporations. And so by not being able to afford things like feed and fertilizer and all that stuff, they were forced to sell their properties, in which case the multinational corporations went in there and snatched up all their land and started growing big agri. That's just one example of it. Anyway, the speech was stirring at some points. He said, "We're not going to be a socialist country." It was very interesting. The camera was on Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders just sat there glumly. The one thing I will say about that is that Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, which I'm gonna get into her name at some point. Her name it's a very interesting name. Okay, remember, I think she was Sandy when she was in high school, but well, maybe I'll just get into her name now. If you look at her name, break her name down into three sections, right? Her first name, Alexandria, is reminiscent of Alexander the Great, who was one of the great conquerors of the early world, right? And then on the back end, her last name, Cortez, is reminiscent of Cortez the killer, who came in and basically slaughtered the Aztecs and took over the Aztec Empire with a major deficit in terms of troops. So she has these two names that are bookends for her, both of whom represent conquerors, right? And Ocasio, there are a couple of different meanings of Ocasio. One, of course, is occasion. And another meaning for Ocasio is time, like it is the time. So if you look at her name and you break it down into its component parts, it is the time of Alexander and Cortez. And between those two names, right, there's a lot of geography and history and culture that's spanned between those two names. It's an interesting sort of notice here with her name. No longer Sandy, she's Alexandra, right? Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. Anyway, when Trump, she's been spouting off about socialism, and Bernie, of course, the king socialist. And when Trump looked at them and said that this is not going to be a socialist country, we already are a socialist country. I mean, let's be clear about that. We have a lot of socialist perks in this country. Okay, this is the way it is. But I think what we're talking about is a label, right? A definition. It's a socialist country. But what he did is he took back the narrative for a moment in time, because none of them could say anything, right? They had to sit there and sit on their hands. So I thought that just taking back the narrative, even for that moment, was a victory for Trump, because they've been directing and guiding and dictating that narrative for the last probably, well, since November, even pre-November, especially with Bernie Sanders. And I was on Twitter last night and I watched Bernie Sanders. I looked at his tweets after the State of the Union, and it's the weird thing about Sanders is that he's just always banging that same drum, which is income inequality and going after the rich and the wealthy and the corporate, and people can't afford this and can't afford that. Well, why don't you really drill down, Bernie? Why don't you look at people like Goldman Sachs, or why don't you look at the hedge funders, the multi-billion-dollar hedge funders who really are dominating the economy. They're like modern day pirates. Why don't you really get into them? Why don't you start naming some names, Bernie? Why don't you talk about the international banking community and fiat lending? Why don't you get into that realm, Bernie? Why don't you get into the Federal Reserve and printing fiat money, bullshit fake money? He's just a guy. He's just a guy that traffics in platitudes and headlines. He'll never be president of the United States. He'll never be president of the United States. And it's like he comes up after the State of the Union about how Trump was disrespectful to women. Where was he disrespectful? Are you kidding me? That's all you've got? It's like, come on. It was weak, Bernie. It was totally weak. Anyway, just a few notices from the State of the Union. Of course, at the end, he's got to get into this whole Pittsburgh thing. All right, can we just talk about the Pittsburgh thing for a moment? That guy, Robert Lee Bowers, whoever the fuck he was, pardon my language, you can't find him. You can't find him anywhere. You can't find him in the Pittsburgh prison system, jail system. You can't find him in the Pennsylvania prison system. And remember, he supposedly lived and was taken to a hospital. Where is this guy? Where's the trial? There's no trial. There is no trial. There is no Robert Lee Bowers. Okay. I don't know what happened there. I don't know whether it was a hit. I don't know whether it was another psychological operation and a complete false flag. I don't know what went down there. What I do know is that the guy who supposedly did all this, first of all, barely existed, barely had a living place, barely had a footprint. How did he work? How did he live? Who knows? I got into this before. So he barely existed except for a brief account on Gab, where, of course, he spewed anti-Semitic and anti-Trump rhetoric just to make sure that he was covering both sides of the aisle. And then, of course, he goes in there with all these weapons. You know how hard it is to get a weapon? It's not easy. It is not easy, especially if you're a fucking basket case or nutcase. Like Nick from Parkland. Are you kidding me? The kid is like on meds. He's got, how does he get weapons? How does he get weapons? He's had visits from the police. He's been in psych wards. How does that kid get weapons? How does this guy Bowers? These are questions that are seldom asked, but they have the weapons. Well, now he doesn't have the weapons, and we don't even know where he is. Is there ever going to be a trial for this Pittsburgh thing? And yet there's Trump beating that drum, banging that drum, because that's what he believes. That's what he's being told. And I don't think it's some weird 5D chess move. It's pretty clear that Trump is very aligned with a particular group that wants to support him, and it's probably helping keep his presidency alive in a lot of ways. He's just announced that he's hired a anti-Semitic czar. So he's hired a commissioner, a commissar. That's what commissioners are. They're commissars. So he's hired a commissar to be able to take on this terrible plague of anti-Semitism that's sweeping the country, sweeping the world. Well, what's happening is that people are waking up and they're noticing certain trends in our society, certain trends in our media, certain trends in our politics. One of the things that they've noticed is that, certain country has dual citizens. How does that even work? That you could be a citizen of one country and a citizen of this country. It doesn't matter what country you're a citizen of, right? Dual citizenship, doesn't that sort of begin to enter into a territory, this territory of being divided, having your loyalties might be divided? Quite possibly. Nobody really talks about it. If you do talk about it, well, you might get the party line, and that party line is going to start to come down harder and harder and harder as people start to get more awake and aware about what's going on in this world, about the psychological manipulation, the media manipulation. And that's just one facet. That is just one facet. There are many, many facets here. Anyway, Trump is doing everything in his power to maintain his close relationship with the people who've helped him considerably in his business life and in his presidential term. Now I'm going to shift the focus a little bit and talk about something with Trump that I think is interesting versus something that I think is really not that interesting. Um, I'm going to tell you a story, share a story with you about a guy by the name of Bill Shenenblum. Now, some of you may know who he is. If if you're a total YouTube rat and a YouTube info junkie, you'll know who Bill Shenenblum is. Let me give you a background on Bill Shenenblum. Bill Shenenblum was an occult priest. He was an occult priest, and he studied everything, everything. And he got very good at his high occult practices. And one of the stories that he tells, which is a very interesting story, I think I've told this one before, was that one time he was doing one of his circle incantations, and he was whisked out of his body, and he traveled at breakneck speed to Saturn. And when he was there, he met this absolutely insanely intense and powerful and malevolent being who hurtled this rod through the air, hit him square in the third eye, and he said it was the most excruciating pain he'd ever experienced in his life. And they was vaulted back into his body. Now, this is a guy who, if you watch Bill, you would understand that this man is not a liar, because as I unwind his story a little bit, you'll see why. So he was going through all these various occult stages and initiations and preparations. And what happened to him was he was told that the highest level of occult teachings that you can actually receive on the planet is through the LDS, the Mormon Church, Latter-day Saints, which is interesting. And I believe that probably is true based on the evolution, based on the roots of the Mormon Church and who John L. Smith, right? So anyway, he goes into the Mormon Church thinking he's going to learn all these magical secrets and increase his power, become a greater and more intense mage. And what happens is that through this kind of veneer of Christianity that the Mormon Church sort of wraps itself in, Shenenblum had a conversion experience, and he actually found God inside of the Mormon Church, which I thought was quite interesting, even though he went there to become a more powerful high priest. So what does this have to do? By the way, you should go find his videos. He's very funny. He's really funny, and he became a minister. Bill became a minister and he told a lot about us. I think he passed away, if I'm not mistaken. But check out his videos. Some of his stories are mind blowing, and he's very, very funny. So why am I talking about this? Well, I was thinking about Trump and how Trump has some very dicey elements to his past. I just have to say one name: Jeffrey Epstein. You guys are on it. You know who Jeffrey Epstein is. You know the relationship. You know, Pedo Island, Ghislaine Maxwell, the young gals. I mean, it's all out there, right? So Trump was a part of that world. I think Trump, during the 70s and the 80s and even the 90s, had a sordid and checkered past. I think Stormy Daniels was probably lightweight soap opera material compared to some of the other stuff that Trump might have been involved in. And I'm being honest, okay? I'm just being honest. This is what the elite and the power elite do. I don't think he was outside that circle. However, I do think that something is happening to this man. Just like how Bill Shenenblum went into the Latter-day Saints and the Mormon Church and had a conversion experience, Trump is being surrounded by evangelical Christians. And at the center of that group is Paula White. And Paula White's kind of a dubious character in and of herself. She had kind of a money scandal with her mega church, but of course she bounced back and asked for forgiveness. It's all part of the evolutionary process, I suppose. But Paula White and a number of these evangelical Christians, they're dispensationalists. They're into the whole John Hagee, Israel scene. They're always around Trump and they're always preying on him, right? And I say pray, P-R-A-Y-N-G, not P-R-E-Y-N-G, although perhaps that may be part of the discussion. But let's just keep it into this part. So they're always preying on him. So I'm thinking, at what point does that actually like impact him? At what point does it change him? At what point does he have this conversion experience himself? And I think he's having something along those lines because when he was talking last night, there was a connection with what he was saying around certain things that I had not experienced with Trump before. That he was actually feeling something, and I mean feeling, because when we get into Trump and the astrology of Trump, we're in his 11th house, where he has Venus, Mercury, and Saturn, all in the sign of Cancer. Now remember, that true node is going through his 11th house, and that south node is going through his 5th house. But I've been telling people, that if you want to get Trump, now is the time, because once that true node goes up into the 10th house, he's going to be probably fairly unbeatable. And I would not be surprised if he gets that second term. So now is really the time. This would be the kind of vulnerable phase. It would be around his children. Right? I've talked about this before. But I feel like he's had some kind of a conversion experience because, I've been working with energy, and I've been working with people for a very, very long time. I've been doing my work in various incarnations for 30 years. So I'm a pretty good read of energy. I'm a pretty good read of connecting with people, their material at an authentic or inauthentic level. And there were moments last night where you could not fake what he was talking about, whether it was infanticide or whether it was connecting with some of these people who'd gone through some very, like the guy who'd gone to prison and he got out because of this new program that Trump has been working with, and the guy became a minister. He did a bunch of stuff with law. I don't think he got a law degree, but I think he was like the equivalent of law clerk in prison. He really connected with that guy. You could just tell, thank you, we're glad you're here. I mean, there was that human element that would come through during the State of the Union, apart from everything else. So I think something's gone on with Trump. I think that he's going through some kind of conversion experience, even if it's at the hands of these, I'm sorry, I'm just going to, they kind of remind me of plastic Christians. Even if it's at the hands of plastic Christians, I think something's going on with the guy. Now, again, I don't agree with everything that he says. I'm not down with all his programs. But at the very least, there's something interesting happening on a spiritual level. That's my sense. That's how I see it. How do you guys feel about that? How do you feel about the State of the Union? Let's see, Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith, thank you. I was thinking of John Smith. It's still early. So I'm still waking up. I was thinking of John Smith. He was the coach of the Michigan State Spartans. I missed the occult power thing. Hey, Juana. Bill Shenenblom. Yes. Yes, Schnobelin. Bill Schnobelin, thank you. Thank you, Equicentric. He's worth watching, by the way. Robert Dixon with the bow and arrow. Yeah, I got my bow and arrow up. Let's see. Trump did a great job last night. I thought, yes, it was Joseph Smith. Yes. I thought I thought the speech was very effective. I thought it was very, very effective. And I thought he did a good job for what he was tasked to do in that moment. Of course, it's just a moment. And then we move out from that moment. But I like the fact that he stole the narrative from the so-called socialists. I heard this term the other day. I loved it to describe Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's a Neiman Marxist. I love that. I absolutely love that. Well, all is not well in Conservativeville, though. Just when you think you can attach yourself to something that feels solid and grounded in reason, clarity, in a group of people that might actually represent that, they circle back from the left and they smack you upside the head with this. This is from naturalnews.com. Fox News now demanding the criminalization and arrest of the anti-vaxxers. We warned you this was coming. It is coming. The UN, I believe, was it UN or UNESCO? They decided to name anti-vaxxers as one of the great global health problems this year. I'll read this to you. A quick reminder, I'll throw this in the chat room, in the chat link, just so you guys have this. Put it right in there. It's not a political agenda. It's become a political agenda, Charles. The dispensationalists, with their relationship with Israel, Christian Zionism has become a political agenda. That's just my feeling. You may have a different feeling, and that's okay. We can disagree on that. All right, just put that in there. Okay, here we go. Just a few days ago, Fox News medical correspondent Dr. Mark Siegel declared war on health freedom by stating that he believes doctors who issue vaccine exemptions should be prosecuted. So these are the doctors. There are still states, I'm in one of them, that says that if you have a philosophical or religious issue with vaccines, you can get an exemption for your kids. Responding to the recent measles outbreak in Washington state, Dr. Siegel went on a tirade against parents who choose not to vaccinate their children with the MMR vaccine for measles, mumps, and rubella, expressing anger over the fact that some Americans are exercising their freedom not to vaccinate. This is a disgrace, Dr. Siegel shouted during the segment, and I am hoping that the doctors that are responsible for this get prosecuted. When asked to explain what he believes is the problem, Dr. Siegel went on to state that there are a few doctors in California that are not even pediatricians. Oh, because being a pediatrician is a really great thing. Well, isn't Ralph Northam a pediatrician? I mean, it basically gave him a certification to abort babies. They were one vote away from that thing going into a tiebreaker. It was a 5-3, right? It was a 5-3 vote in. It wasn't even the people. It was a 5-3 vote in the chamber in state of Virginia. And if it was 4-4, guess who the tiebreaker is? Ralph Northam. But being a pediatrician is sacred. Who are writing exemption letters for a ton of kids in certain schools. Some schools have to have up to 20% of their kids don't have the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine because they got a crazy exemption letter. That's fraudulent, Dr. Siegel added, barely taking a breath amid his rant. So Big Pharma is the biggest advertiser at Fox News. Anyone who watches Fox News and pays close attention to what's being advertised during every commercial break has likely noticed that the network pushes pharmaceutical drug after pharmaceutical drug after pharmaceutical drug. So much drug advertising, in fact, at Fox News might as well be renamed Big Pharma News. With this in mind, it's not really all that surprising that Fox's top medical talking head is aggressively pro-vaccine, as drugs and vaccines appear to be what keep Fox News financially afloat. It also explains why Fox News remains aggressively anti-cannabis, as healing plants are a threat to Fox's big pharma advertisers. All Americans have the right to refuse vaccines for any reason. This is true. Contrary to Dr. Siegel's wild claims, vaccine exemptions are not fraudulent, and all doctors, pediatricians or otherwise, are free to write them from whomever they wish. Further, sovereign American citizens, by the way, sovereign and citizens, you cannot use in the same sentence. They're two different things. So it's further, sovereign Americans are free to refuse vaccines for any reason, though technically or legally need a vaccine exemption at all. Though the medical establishment is working overtime to squelch that truth, as Mike Adams, a health ranger, warned about, a medical doctor can give you an exemption for whatever you want, but there's not even a law there, points out Alex Jones from InfoWars. Okay, Alex Jones just nailed. Alex Jones is actually really good on the vaccine issue. That's something he knows inside and out. So Dr. Siegel is saying it's a fraud when he's engaged in fraud. See, he's saying these are fraudulent letters. You don't even need the letter for the exemption. They just trick you into that. You have a right. There's no law that you have to take these vaccines. According to Dr. Siegel, however, it's a problem. The parents are allowed to refuse vaccines, even with a signed medical exemption. In his view, the MMR vaccine, presumably all vaccines, are simply awesome, which in his mind means that everybody should be forced by the government to get injected. It's one of the greatest inventions in the history of public health, Dr. Siegel maintains about the MMR vaccine. For more in-depth discussion about measles, be sure to check out this article by Roger Stark. Anyway, you can find all that over on the link I dropped into the chat box on the live stream. Yeah, I just wanted to give you guys an update. It's all about consent. It's all about consent. I don't consent to it. I don't consent to it. You don't consent to it. We don't consent to this. We don't consent to having these fluids injected into our bodies and into the bodies of our children. We don't consent to it. Remember that. Consent is the most vital thing we have. Consent is a function of the will. Saying yes and saying no are very, very important components to who we are on a daily basis. And they determine not just the quality of our choices, they determine outcomes. So consent is vital, and don't lose track of what it means for you in your life. Speaking of consent, here in this town, we have reached the threshold where we have enough signatures to take down the city hall and put an amendment on the city charter and get on the ballot in May to take the fluoride out of the water here in Fredericksburg. So we had to reach 5% of the total registered voters. And I just want to thank Jeanette Hormuth for being just an absolute bulldog and going out and getting over, I guess we're at about close to 500 signatures. And these are most, I would say, out of the 500, in the mid 400s, verified. These are verified, which means that we've reached our criterion. And we're going to go down on Friday morning, and we're going to present the material to the people at City Hall, City Clerk, and we're going to start this process. We're going to start this legal process to get the hydrofluorosilicic acid out of the water here in Fredericksburg. So it's going to start to get real interesting. We've already had kind of this blowback from the dentists here, who just seem to be absolutely, utterly robotic. But it's going to be very interesting. But there's been a continued sort of effort in the local newspaper to control the narrative in the letters to the editor section about fluoride. There's a lot going on now, and the dentists are they're on their toes, which is great, totally great. So I'll keep you guys posted, and I think once we get on the ballot, I think we're going to send out a press release to a lot of the local media outlets here, and you may even hear about us. It's this little town in the hill country in Texas, or maybe not. Maybe they'll just kind of keep a damper on it. But we're excited, and for me, it's a way to be involved at a local level, which I think is an important function for us to look at the quality of our lives and making sure that choices for us aren't being made theoretically without our consent. Pretty simple. So I'll keep you posted. For everybody that's donated to the cause or GoFundMe account, thank you for that. I may do kind of another call for that later on down the line when we get this on the ballot. We start taking out ads in the newspaper. We're close. We're very, very close. So if you're the spiritual kind, say a little prayer for us and help us get this thing across the finish line. I'll keep you posted. You can find out on Facebook too. We got a Facebook page, which is Clean Water Fred, short for Fredericksburg. Okay. Let me check in with you guys before I sign off today. How about Chuck Schumer's? Chuck Schumer's a scumbag. I'm sorry. Let's see what else we have here. My daughter's pediatrician in California, Chris says, treated to call the sheriff on me because she had 101-degree fever. Can you imagine that? Threatened. Some of these people are just robots, man. Where I live, parents cannot register their child in public school unless the child is vaccinated. Yeah, I think there's workarounds. There's always workarounds. And, this is the problem. So, I mean, Edgardo, I feel for you, man. I totally feel for you. I have a kid, and I don't even want to get into that. But, ultimately, what do we want to do? We want to be able to, I guess, have as much control over the quality of lives or the quality of life for our children, whether it's from what they're putting into their bodies to what they're putting into their heads. And I think ultimately we have to stare that down on a personal level. What else, Charles? Imagine you get arrested for refusing. I know. It's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. Let's see. Sue says, seriously, measles has always been able to be treated with cell salt homeopathy. Look at that. You guys are so on. My son had a seizure from the MMR vaccine. Yep. Yep. Paulette says, State of the Union address effective, agree that Trump is undergoing spiritual growth. AOC thought he was unprepared. No, he's not. There's something going on with Trump. We're seeing the transformation. We're seeing a spiritual transformation of somebody. Good Vibration says, my second year of drinking only distilled water, now using shungite in my water bakes. And how's that going for you? Is that helping out? I'm going to look into some dry fasting here pretty soon. I'm hearing some interesting things about it. Anyway, all right. Hey, listen, thank you everybody for showing out, coming out, being here. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm sitting on some of my good material for me and Emily, because we're going to be doing a mashup, and I don't like to duplicate my stuff. So I'm going to say something. I got some interesting things to talk about, especially with the Super Bowl. I'm sitting on some Super Bowl stuff. So, hey, have a great day. Glad we're here. Glad we're here. JMP Love, come on, 9 a.m. every day. Every day, or at least as close to it as possible. But you can always watch it afterwards. You can always watch us afterwards. It's the wonder of YouTube. All right, you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Thank you once again for joining me. Oh, before I go, I've just launched a new webinar, and it's going to be taking place on March 2nd, so about a month from today, and it's on Mars. It's on Mars in the natal chart, and it's on Mars. You're going to get Mars. You get a lot of Mars in this webinar. The mythology of Mars. We're going to get into the planet Mars, some of the so-called hidden history of Mars. But we're really going to get into the chart, because Mars is the motor of the chart. And I feel like it's one of the more undervalued and underappreciated aspects of the chart. You know, we talk a lot about Saturn and Pluto and Neptune and the moon, but Mars doesn't always get its fair share and its due. And it's vital. It's one of the most important aspects in an astrological chart to know about. So that's on my website right now. I'll put it up on YouTube, and I'll start putting links here in the chat box. And there'll be one after I go through and kind of edit this thing a little bit. If you want to sign up right now, the cost is $22. It's going to be a 3.5-hour seminar, and that's going to be on March 2nd, March being the month of Mars. So March 2nd, it's a Saturday, and probably we'll go a little bit over 3.5 hours because there's so much material to cover. And then I think you've got like 2 weeks to get in at that rate. And then after that, it pops up to $33. So people have been interested and asking about Mars. We've got Mars in Aries right now. It's the first of the year. This energy, this Mars energy is really imprinting very early on in this Gregorian cycle. So check it out. And more astrological related news, I'm going to be having on the 3rd, March 3rd, I'm going to be having, there's a Mar thing here, right? There's a Mar thing going on. It's March 3rd, and that's Sunday night. Of course, I'll be doing my live stream that night, and I'm going to be joined by Marina Darkstar, and we've connected through Twitter, which has been great, through YouTube, and I just saw a huge bird go by my window. I was like, what was that? Anyway, we're going to be hanging out, and we're going to be doing a live stream together on March 3rd. And I'm looking forward to it because I think we'll have some interesting stuff to share and talk about. So there's some astrological news for you. We got the webinar. We got on Mars and Marina Darkstar hanging out on the live stream March 3rd. Okay? All right. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you back here tomorrow, 9 a.m. 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. Have a great day.